Hello, welcome to Phantom Homicide. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a story that's well, it's shocking, truly audacious. It's a case that actually forced legal systems worldwide to rethink some fundamental ideas about life, death, and disappearance.
We're talking about John Darwin, aren't we? The infamous Canoe man.
Exactly, and how he twisted civil law, exploiting loopholes to fake his own death and vanish for 5 whole years.
Yeah, it's much more than just a tabloid sensation, isn't it? It really exposes something quite terrifying. It shows what happens when a legal tool, something actually designed to help grieving families deal with ambiguous loss.
That uncertainty when someone's just gone.
Precisely. When that tool gets weaponized for massive fraud, it's a profound betrayal.
And the scale of it. The disappearance itself creates such grief, but then to find out it was all orchestrated.
It's a chilling thought, and it really laid bare the weaknesses in how the law handled missing persons back then.
So our mission today is sort of twofold. First, we're going to trace the facts of the Darwin case itself. The debts, the canoe, the lies.
All the way to that single photograph that brought the whole thing crashing down.
Right. But then second, and this is where we really dig deep, we'll look at the legal fallout. We'll be using the Irish Law Reform Commission's consultation paper, that's LRC CP 64 from 2011, as our guide.
Yeah, that paper used cases like Darwin's, but also stories of genuine loss to argue for some really crucial safeguards. Safeguards against exactly this kind of betrayal and, frankly, systemic failure.
Okay, let's start at the beginning then. Section 1, the staging of a tragedy. Who was John Darwin?
Well, on the surface, he didn't really fit the image of some criminal mastermind, did he? He was a former teacher, he'd worked as a prison officer at Home House,
Pretty normal jobs. And family life.
married to Anne for nearly 30 years. They had 2 sons, Mark and Anthony. Outwardly, you'd say, yeah, solid middle-class life.
But underneath that surface,
Ah, yes. There was this restless ambition, almost frantic. John Darwin was constantly involved in what the sources call money-making sidelines.
and these weren't typical hobbies, were they? I remember reading about garden gnomes.
Garden gnomes, snail breeding.
Hmm,
It sounds almost comical in retrospect.
a bit bizarre.
But then his focus shifted to something much bigger, a property rental empire, or at least the dream of one.
And that's where things started to seriously unravel.
Absolutely. He bought 2 properties right next to each other on the seafront in Seton Carew, one for them to live in, the other to convert into flats.
Big plans, big investment.
Huge investment. And it went sour, fast. Mortgage payments apparently shot up, and suddenly they were facing this catastrophic financial crisis.
And we're not talking about struggling a bit here. The debt was enormous.
The figure cited is £700,000. Just imagine. £700,000.
Yeah.
Life-destroying debt.
Now, for most people facing that, bankruptcy is the intended legal road, isn't it? A way to reset.
It is, but John Darwin refused. And that refusal tells you a lot about him.
Why? Why refuse?
According to the sources, it was the shame. He couldn't bear the public humiliation, the perceived failure of bankruptcy.
So the shame of debt was worse than faking his own death.
Apparently so. For him, avoiding that public shame outweighed the colossal moral and legal risks of the plan he cooked up.
That decision, that refusal to face failure, really is the trigger for everything that follows, isn't it?
It's the pivot point. And the plan wasn't about escaping the shame quietly. It was about cashing in.
Right. The life insurance. What was the potential payout?
The motivation was purely financial. Fake his death at sea, trigger the life insurance and pension payouts. The estimate at the time was around £250,000.
Which, adjusted for inflation today, is...
It's roughly equivalent to £510,000 in 2023 money. So we're talking about a scheme designed to net them over £500,000.
£500,000 built entirely on a lie. And Anne's participation, of course.
Crucial. Without her, none of it works.
So let's talk about the staging. March 21st, 2002.
Right. John makes sure he's seen out in his canoe or kayak near Seton Carew. Plausible deniability, right? Dangerous waters, unpredictable weather.
Setting the scene.
Exactly. Then, conveniently, he doesn't show up for his night shift to the prison. That's the cue for Anne.
The 999 call.
She makes a call, plays the part of the terrified wife, feigning panic, saying something dreadful might have happened.
Must have been quite a performance.
It had to be.
Yeah.
And it worked. It triggered a massive response. We're talking a huge, expensive search operation.
How big?
5 RNLI lifeboats, 2 Coast Guard rescue teams, even a police aircraft, all scouring the coast for a man who was very much alive and kicking off his fraud. The waste of resources is staggering.
And Anne, Her role started immediately, and she almost slipped up straight away, didn't she? Those little red flags.
Yeah, investigators probably didn't realize the scale of it then, but looking back, her actions were suspicious from minute one. When the police asked for photos of John, for identification purposes,
Yeah.
standard procedure.
What did she say?
She claimed they didn't have any. Her exact words were, "We are not ones for photographs."
After nearly 30 years of marriage, not one photo. That's just unbelievable.
It immediately suggests someone trying to erase an identity, doesn't it? Not help find someone.
Definitely suspicious.
And then, that same night, she fully commits. She drives him, picks him up in her car, and takes him to Durham Railway Station.
So she actively facilitated his disappearance.
Absolutely. That's him going off-grid. His first step into becoming a phantom. Apparently, he started out roughing it in a tent somewhere in Cumbria.
Okay, so he starts off in a tent. But the truly mind-boggling part is that he didn't stay hidden far away for long, did he?
Not at all. This is where the story becomes almost farcical, utterly chilling. He soon returned.
And lived where? Not back in the family home, surely.
Almost. He moved into a bedsit in the property right next door, a property they owned and had divided into, I think, 15 bedsits in total.
He was living next door, literally feet away.
Yes, imagine that. Publicly grieving your dead husband while knowing he's just through the wall. The psychological pressure on Anne must have been immense, or maybe just cold calculation.
And how did he move between the two houses? This detail is just bizarre.
It is. The sources confirm they actually created a secret connecting doorway, hidden behind a wardrobe.
Like something out of Narnia, but much more sinister.
Right. And the purpose wasn't just for secret meetings. Apparently, he used it to sneak back into the family home for, wait for it, morning fry-ups.
You're kidding. A secret passage for breakfast.
That's what the reports say. It speaks volumes about the level of audacity, the sheer nerve of it all. It's beyond just the financial motive, isn't it? It's about entitlement.
Was the shame of bankruptcy really worse than the risk of one of his sons walking in on him eating bacon?
You'd think not, but apparently for John Darwin, yes. And the disguise he adopted, also incredibly low effort.
What did he do?
He started using the name John Jones, an identity stolen from an infant who died in Sunderland back in 1950. Standard practice for fraudsters, sadly.
Physically.
Grew a beard, walked with a limp he apparently just acquired. That's basically it. He seemed to think that would be enough.
In a place like Seton Carew where people knew him, surely not.
And you'd be right. It wasn't enough. There were near misses, several times.
People actually saw him.
Oh, yes. Tenants in the bedsits saw him. A former colleague from the prison saw him.
What happened?
The most famous incident involved a tenant named Lee Wadrop. He saw John, recognized him instantly, and asked him point blank,
"Aren't you supposed to be dead?"
"Wow." What did Darwin say?
"Just don't tell anyone about this."
Yeah.
Chillingly casual. But here's the thing. These reports, these genuine sightings, they were somehow dismissed by the authorities at the time, called nonsense.
So the system itself kind of enabled the fraud to continue.
In a way, yes. Whether through disbelief or maybe just not connecting the dots, he got away with it for 5 years, living right under everyone's noses.
Which brings us neatly to the legal loophole he was exploiting and the whole civil law framework around missing persons.
This is absolutely central to understanding how this was even possible. Anne needed that insurance money, right, to make the whole thing worthwhile.
But how did she get it if he wasn't officially dead?
Under the common law system back then, there was this key principle. A missing person is legally presumed to be alive for up to 7 years. 7 years is a long time to wait if you're genuinely grieving and financially struggling.
It is. But the law did allow for that period to be shortened if there was enough circumstantial evidence suggesting death, or via a coroner's inquest, and eventually managed to get a presumed death declaration.
And that declaration was the key to the money.
Exactly. That order allowed her to legally administer John's estate, access his assets, pay off debts well, ostensibly pay off debts, and crucially, claim the life insurance and pension payouts.
The £500,000 jackpot.
Precisely. But it's really important to understand the limitation of that declaration under the old law, something the Law Reform Commission heavily criticized later.
What was the limitation?
The declaration only allowed her to deal with his estate, his money and property. It did not automatically end their marriage or civil partnership.
So, legally, she was the widow administering the estate of her dead husband, but she was still married to him.
You've got it. A completely absurd legal limbo. A legal ghost marriage, as you put it. If John had reappeared then, legally, they were still married.
And if she'd remarried in the meantime...
Her second marriage would have been void. Bigamy, in the eyes of the law. Imagine that for a genuinely bereaved person trying to rebuild their life.
It's a terrible position to put someone in, but for the Darwins, it was just another legal quirk they didn't have to worry about.
Not until they decided to take the plan international. They wanted a fresh start, away from the UK.
Where did they aim for?
Panama became the target. John traveled out there using his fake John Jones passport to scout locations. They eventually bought a flat, even some land. Had ambitions of building a holiday resort, believe it or not.
Still chasing the big money.
Always. But trying to settle properly in Panama, that's where the bureaucratic reality hit them hard.
What was the snag?
The Panamanian government tightened its visa regulations. They brought in new rules for investors' visas.
Okay.
And the crucial part. These visas required identity verification checks carried out by the applicant's home police force, in this case, the UK police.
Ah, and John Jones.
An identity stolen from a dead baby was never going to stand up to official UK police scrutiny. He knew it. He couldn't get the visa under his alias without the whole house of cards collapsing.
So that need for a legitimate identity basically forced his hand, leading to the amnesia plan.
It seems to be the major catalyst for his return, yes. But before that return, they made one catastrophic, unforced error in Panama.
The photograph.
The photograph. In 2006, while looking at property, they posed for a picture with a local estate agent, smiling, happy, very much alive and together.
And this photo ended up online.
Yes. Time-stamped, uploaded to the agent's website, moved to Panama.com. They dodged the Coast Guard, police suspicions, even their own family for 5 years, but they couldn't dodge the internet's memory. That photo was sitting there, a digital time bomb waiting to explode.
So the Panama plan is dead in the water because of the visa issue. John Darwin needs a way back, a way to be himself again without facing fraud charges.
Hence, the final desperate act, the amnesia ploy. December 1st, 2007, he walks into West End Central Police Station in London.
And delivers that line.
"I think I might be a missing person," claimed he had amnesia. Couldn't remember anything since June 2000. A complete blank for the entire period he was dead.
He must have hoped this would just wipe the slate clean. Return as a victim, not a fraudster.
That seems to have been the gamble. And Anne, contacted in Panama, played her part one last time. Feigned shock, joy, relief. The whole repertoire.
But the people who truly felt that joy, that relief, were their sons, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Mark and Anthony were genuinely overjoyed.
Yeah.
Their dad, miraculously back from the dead after 5 years of grief. Imagine that emotional roller coaster.
Which makes the eventual truth even more devastating for them.
Unimaginably so. But the police, they weren't buying the amnesia story. Not for a second.
Were they already suspicious before he walked in?
Yes, significantly. They'd actually opened a financial investigation into Anne about 3 months before John reappeared.
Why? What triggered that?
A tip-off. Apparently from one of Anne's colleagues at work. Someone had noticed inconsistencies. Well, Anne was publicly the grieving widow, supposedly struggling. But behind the scenes, she was taking foreign holidays, she was transferring large sums of money overseas, she was actively planning to emigrate to Panama. It just didn't add up.
The lifestyle didn't match the story.
Exactly. So police were already watching the money trail. John's reappearance just intensified their focus.
And then came the final blow, not from police work, but from the public.
The power of Google. A member of the public, intrigued by this bizarre story of the returning canoe man, typed John, Anne, and Panama into Google Images.
And up popped
the photo, the 2006 picture with the estate agent. John and Anne smiling together in Panama, very much not separated by death or amnesia.
That must have been the moment the entire deception just shattered.
Completely. When the police showed Anne the photo, she knew the game was up. She confirmed it was John.
And her words then were quite telling, weren't they? Focused on the real victims.
Chillingly so. She reportedly said, "Yes, that's him. My sons will never forgive me."
An admission of the fraud, yes, but also of that profound, irreparable family betrayal.
John was arrested soon after, wasn't he? At one of his son's houses.
Yes, at Anthony's house. He quickly folded, admitted the fraud charges, admitted getting the false passport using the John Jones's identity.
But Anne initially tried to fight it.
She did. She pleaded not guilty at first. Her defense was based on coercion. She claimed John had bullied her, forced her into the whole scheme.
Coercive control, that's a complex area, especially back then.
It was, and perhaps less understood legally than it is now. The prosecution argued, successfully, that while John might have been controlling, Anne was an active participant over 5 long years. She managed the finances, she told the lies, she deceived officials, and crucially, she deceived her own children face-to-face for half a decade.
So the court didn't buy the coercion defense?
Ultimately, no. She was convicted. 6 counts of fraud, 9 counts of money laundering. A calculating partner in the crime, not just a passive victim of coercion. And the sons, Mark and Anthony, their reaction.
Utter devastation and betrayal. They released a joint statement saying they felt they'd been victims of a large scam and wanted nothing more to do with either parent.
Understandable. The judge even commented on it, didn't he?
Yes, the judge explicitly stated they had suffered the grossest form of betrayal. It highlights the human cost far beyond the financial fraud.
Let's talk sentencing. John got 6 years and 3 months. Anne got slightly longer, 6.5 years. Why the difference? He was the architect, surely.
It's interesting, isn't it? The reasoning seems to be that while John masterminded it, Anne's sustained deception, particularly towards her children, was seen as somehow, well, the term used was more transgressive.
A deeper violation of trust, perhaps? Especially from a mother.
That appears to be the implication, that her active maintenance of the lie over 5 years, the face-to-face deceit of her grieving sons, was judged particularly harshly. It was a colder, more calculated cruelty in the court's eyes.
And the money. Did they manage to get most of it back?
Yes, the authorities were actually quite successful there. The total recovered from Anne Darwin, mainly through life insurance, pensions, and selling those Manama properties, was £501,641.39.
Pretty close to the amount they defrauded.
By 2015, between them, they'd repaid a total of £541,762.39. But there's another twist in the financial tale.
Oh.
John was initially ordered to repay a much larger sum, nearly £680,000 under confiscation orders. But by 2014, reports showed he'd only paid back £121.
£121? How is that possible?
It seems most of the assets, the money, the properties, were legally held in Anne's name. So once she'd repaid the $500,000, there wasn't much left that was legally attributable to John for the authorities to seize.
So another loophole in a way, highlighting how complex asset recovery can be in these fraud cases.
Exactly. It shows how fraudsters can structure things to make recovery difficult, even after conviction.
Okay, so the trial concludes, the Darwins are jailed, but the case itself sends shockwaves through the legal world, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It became this instant, glaring example of how outdated the civil law regarding missing persons really was. It wasn't just Darwin. There were other historical cases, like the MP John Stonehouse, who faked his death in '74. But Darwin really crystallized the problem for the modern era.
And this directly leads to bodies like the Irish Law Reform Commission taking action.
Yes. The LRC's 2011 consultation paper, CP64, was a direct response to the need for reform highlighted by cases like Darwin's. They looked at the existing law in Ireland and found it severely lacking.
What were the main problems they identified?
Primarily, the law was basically stuck with 2 very limited tools. First, there were some provisions in the Coroners Act, but they mostly applied only if a body was known to be destroyed, like in a fire or explosion, not helpful for someone just vanishing.
And the second tool?
The old common law presumption of death, that rigid, often brutal 7-year waiting period before someone could be declared legally dead.
7 years where families are just...
Exactly. And the immediate problems weren't just about declaring death. They were incredibly practical, day-to-day issues.
Like what?
Think about it. Your spouse disappears. How do you pay the mortgage if the account needs both signatures? How do you access joint savings? Renew the car insurance? Sell assets to cover debts? The old law basically froze everything.
Creating immense hardship for genuinely grieving families.
Immense. We heard testimony from people like Peter Lawrence, whose daughter Claudia went missing. He spoke powerfully about these exact practical nightmares. The law forced families into this horrible legal and financial paralysis.
You mentioned the term ambiguous loss earlier. This legal paralysis must make that psychological trauma even worse.
Definitely. Ambiguous loss is that awful state of not knowing, being unable to grieve properly because there's no closure. The person is gone, but maybe not dead. The legal system, by forcing this 7-year wait, essentially mirrored and amplified that psychological limbo.
It was unresponsive to the immediate crisis.
Completely. And that unresponsiveness, that delay built into the system, is precisely the kind of environment where a calculated fraud like John Darwin's could fester for 5 years.
So what was the LRC's big proposal to fix this?
They proposed a fundamental overhaul, moving away from the single 7-year rule and creating a more nuanced system aligning with international best practice, like the Council of Europe recommendations from 2009.
How would it work?
They suggested creating 2 distinct statutory categories for presumed death based on how certain the death actually was.
Okay, let's break those down. What's Category 1?
Category 1. Death is virtually certain. This applies in situations where, sadly, there's almost no chance of survival.
Like,
Catastrophic events. Think major natural disasters. They cited historical cases like the Messina earthquake, where someone was declared dead after just 3 months, or modern tragedies like plane crashes. Air France 447 was mentioned,
right.
or events like 9/11. Also specific violent incidents where survival is impossible.
And in those cases, no waiting period.
Exactly. The proposal was for no minimum waiting time. If the evidence points overwhelmingly to death, action can be taken quickly.
Who would make that declaration?
They suggested extending the powers of the coroner. The coroner could issue a declaration that would be legally identical to a standard death certificate. This allows the family to deal with the estate immediately, avoiding that financial crisis on top of the emotional devastation.
That makes sense. What about Category 2?
Category 2. Death is highly probable. This is where the circumstances aren't quite as definitive as a plane crash, but death is still the most likely outcome.
Examples?
Disappearance in dangerous circumstances may be someone lost while climbing in treacherous mountains, or cases where the length of absence, combined with the circumstances, strongly suggests death. This could include victims like the disappeared in Ireland.
Does the 7-year rule still feature here?
Yes, it remains a key reference point. But the process would be formalized through a dedicated register of presumed deaths. It's not just waiting out the clock, it's an assessed probability based on evidence over time.
Crucially, though, how do you stop another John Darwin slipping through this new system? What were the safeguards?
This is where the LRC got really specific, effectively creating what you could call the Darwin test. A comprehensive checklist for courts to use before issuing any presumed death order.
Designed specifically to catch fraud.
Absolutely. The court would have to actively consider things like the exact time, location, and circumstances of the disappearance. Was it genuinely perilous?
Okay.
The nature and extent of any searches. Did the family cooperate fully or obstruct? Like Anne Darwin with the photos.
Makes sense?
A prior history of fraud involving the missing person or the applicant. Very direct.
Targeting the motive.
Exactly. And critically, was there a motive for the missing person not to be dead, but simply to disappear? Like, say, 700,000 pounds of debt.
The Darwin special.
Precisely. They also included checking the timing of life insurance policies. Were they taken out suspiciously close to the disappearance? And did the person abandon valuable property in a way that suggests they planned to vanish?
So it shifts the focus from just passively waiting 7 years to actively investigating the reasons for the disappearance.
Yes. It's about forensic scrutiny of the circumstances and motives, specifically designed to flag these kinds of calculated self-serving frauds.
That deals with declaring death. But what about that awful waiting period itself, the immediate financial chaos families face? Did the LRC address that?
They did. This was seen as a critical piece of the puzzle, providing immediate practical help before a death declaration is even considered. They proposed a system for interim administration.
A sort of financial first aid.
Exactly. A way for families to manage essential financial affairs, pay the mortgage, access funds for bills, handle debts without the pressure of declaring their loved one dead, especially if they still hold out hope.
How would that work? Who could apply?
The model was based on systems already working in places like Australia and Canada. An administrator, usually a spouse, partner, next of kin, sometimes even a creditor, or the state, could be appointed by the court.
How soon after someone goes missing?
The proposed trigger was relatively quick, after the person has been missing and out of contact for at least 90 days.
And are there conditions?
Yes, 2 key ones. First, reasonable efforts must have been made to actually find the missing person. You can't just jump to administration. Second, it must be clearly shown to be in the best interests of the missing person, for example, to stop their debts spiraling out of control.
You mentioned the Daniel Rosewall case earlier as an example.
Yes, that was a textbook case. His father applied to be administrator, not because he thought Daniel was dead, but because he knew Daniel had credit card bills and loans piling up interest. He needed the legal power to manage those debts to protect Daniel's financial future while still hoping Daniel would return.
So the administrator's powers are limited.
Very much so. They're usually specific, time-limited, perhaps up to 2 years initially, maybe renewable, just to handle urgent matters and preserve the estate, not full control forever.
This seems like exactly the kind of mechanism that could have helped Anne Darwin manage the initial debt crisis legitimately if John had been genuinely lost at sea.
Absolutely. It provides a legal, transparent pathway to financial stability during that awful initial period, potentially reducing the pressure or temptation to resort to fraud just to keep the lights on.
Now let's go back to the marriage issue, that legal ghost marriage. How did the LRC propose fixing that absurdity?
They tackled it head-on, recognizing that under the old law, a presumed death declaration often didn't end the marriage, was simply unjust, and created impossible situations.
Like the returning dead husband making his widow a bigamist if she'd remarried.
Exactly. So the LRC's proposal was clear and decisive.
Which was?
A formal declaration of presumed death, under either Category 1 or Category 2, should have the automatic legal effect of dissolving the marriage or civil partnership. Full stop.
So the surviving partner is legally free to move on to remarry without fear of the past coming back to invalidate their future.
Precisely. It brings the law into line with common sense and with provisions already in place in Northern Ireland and Scotland. It provides finality and allows people to rebuild their lives.
Okay, but then the ultimate twist. What happens if the person does return? The canoe man walks back into the police station after being declared legally dead and their marriage dissolved. What happens then?
The law has to account for that possibility, whether it's due to genuine error or, like Darwin, fraud. The returning person can apply to the court for a variation order.
To undo the death declaration.
Essentially, yes. To vary the original order concerning their estate and status. But, and this is crucial, there are protections built in for innocent third parties.
Meaning?
The variation order generally cannot overturn property rights that were acquired legally, in good faith, and for value, while the person was presumed dead.
So if Anne had legally sold their house to pay debts while John was dead, John couldn't just demand the house back from the new owner upon his return.
Correct. That new owner, who bought the house legitimately, is protected. This ensures stability in property law. You can't have transactions constantly under threat of being undone years later.
But does the returning person get anything back?
They might. The court still has the power to order compensation or restitution from the person who administered the estate, like Anne, or potentially from the estate itself if funds remain. The standard is what the court deems reasonable in all the circumstances.
So it tries to balance protecting innocent buyers with providing some recourse for the person who returns.
That's the aim. Protect transactional certainty, but allow for fairness where possible, especially regarding assets still held by the original administrator.
And given the global nature of travel and, well, disappearance, did the reforms consider the international angle? People vanishing abroad or trying to vanish to abroad like the Darwins?
Yes, that was definitely part of the LRC's thinking. They acknowledged that disappearances often cross borders.
Like Irish citizens going missing overseas.
Exactly. They mentioned cases like Brendan Donegan, lost in Peru. The proposal was that the Irish High Court should have clear jurisdiction to handle applications concerning Irish citizens missing abroad, using the same new criteria and safeguards.
And recognizing decisions made elsewhere.
Yes, and also having the power to recognize presumed death orders made by competent authorities in other countries. It's about creating a coherent system that works in a world where people move around, whether for holidays, work, or more nefarious reasons like fleeing dead to Panama.
It really is quite something that one man's audacious fraud, John Darwin's scheme, ended up shining such a harsh light on these deep-seated problems in the law.
It's a classic case of a hard case-making, or at least highlighting the need for better law. His utterly selfish act inadvertently exposed how the existing system, probably designed with compassion in mind centuries ago, just wasn't equipped for modern realities.
That 7-year standard, the lack of immediate administrative tools.
The failure to forensically examine motive. It all created a space where this kind of elaborate long-term deception was disturbingly possible.
The ultimate betrayal was facilitated by a system that lacked the tools to spot it.
Precisely. And the LRC reforms, spurred by Darwin and other tragedies, aimed to plug those gaps, providing faster relief for the genuinely bereaved, while building in the checks and balances needed to catch the fraudsters. It's about balancing compassion with vigilance.
Something to think about, isn't it? When you hear about a missing person case, is the law helping the family manage or just freezing them in time, potentially vulnerable?
The hope is that with reforms like those proposed, incorporating that Darwin test checklist, the system becomes more responsive and more resilient, spotting the motive to disappear while offering real practical help to those consumed by ambiguous loss. Getting that balance right is crucial.
Okay, so we hope you liked our today's discussion. For more such discussions, subscribe to our channel, Phantom Homicide.